I think in general, the thing you have to really realize is that there's just longer lead times, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, they import most of their raw materials, so naturally, because the difference between them and China has most of the natural resources to create a lot of their products. Vietnam just doesn't. So they're getting most of their stuff from Korea or China or India or somewhere else where they actually have more natural resources. So that adds to your lead time. Secondly, they're just not as sophisticated as the Chinese right now in terms of port system, in terms of logistics and all that. So for them, getting things from the factory actually to the port, there's less ports in Vietnam than there are in China. So you have to schedule that a little bit more in advance. So again, that adds to the lead time. And the third thing, culturally, it's a little bit different. So China's yes, yes, yes. Vietnam is what can you do for me now? So they don't care about the long-term relationship as much as China does. They care more about what money can I make right now. That's kind of how their mindset is. So if you're coming to them with a smaller purchase order, they don't really care because they have someone else who's lining up with a bigger purchase order. So volume is really critical in terms of getting production done in Vietnam versus China. You might have a better chance of finding someone who's working with smaller minimum order quantities, smaller volumes, and stuff like that. The bigger industries that are moving there are mostly in the cut and sew industry, so more apparel, backpacks, bags, stuff like that. And that's because they're able to get cheaper labor there, and the raw material goods aren't as much, as price differentiated between, somewhere like China, Korea, and all that stuff. Nike, Adidas, they're starting to move their factories into Vietnam, and that's mostly in the apparel game. They're just much better from an infrastructure perspective at that. Cut and sew, it's a lot easier to make. The more complex items like injection molded items, those are still, mostly manufactured in China. And I think their machining, their tooling, and their workforce is just much more adept to that style of manufacturing. There's no difference between what it takes to get into the United States. You just need to make sure that you have all that testing done. And, there are third-party testing facilities all over the world. So you just got to make sure that you find one that's affordable in the country that you're doing your manufacturing in. But as long as you have the ability to have longer lead times, which for most companies they don't have that, but if you can have longer lead times, then going to Vietnam is not going to be as much of an issue. You're just going to have a larger purchase order and a longer lead time.